Aviva, we want to start with you because you've got a plane to catch. You're on your way to the United States. But we'd like to know a little about you just to begin. Tell us where you come from. Where did you land up in Israel? Give us a minute or two about your history.
So I was born in Randfontein, South Africa, and I came to live in Israel with my family when I was 9 years old on Kibbutz Kfar Aza. There's lots of South Africans that live there, but Keith and I decided to move to a kibbutz with younger people, and we've been living on Kibbutz Kfar Aza for more than 40 years, and I've been married to Keith for more than 43 years. And Keith being in Gaza, not knowing where he is, how he's feeling, just breaks my heart. I was there. I know what's happening. And it's just too cruel for me to think that Keith, that I love so much, and the hostages that are there are going through what they're going through. And I want to ask everybody that's listening to me, we need to be together and scream and shout. Nobody in the world should go through what they're going through. It's too cruel for us humans knowing, because I was there and I've been talking about everything that I went through. And it doesn't mean nothing. It means so much. It means that we need to get them out as soon as possible before another hostage will die. The 6 hostages that came back 2 weeks ago, that were killed and shot in their face in such bad conditions, in a tunnel with no air. They had infections in their bodies, just like I had. I was in a tunnel just like them, and I've been screaming for 10 months. What they went through, exactly the same thing I went through, and Keith is going through the same thing there, lying on a filthy, dirty mattress on the floor like a rug, with no human rights.
So, Aviva, let's actually tell us a little, or just for a moment, about Kibbutz Kfar Aza before the 7th of October. Describe the people. What were the people like? What was life like?
Kfar Aza is a beautiful kibbutz. It's a community about 950 people that live there, and we're all peacemakers. And we're very, very close to Gaza. We heard the missiles for more than 20 years coming towards us and all over the country. I used to hide behind trees for many, many years until we got this little shelter. We used to hide, our family used to hide in the bathroom while the rockets came from Gaza. So Keith and I have been living there. We've got lots and lots of friends. And 64 people were murdered. There were 2 babies that 9 months old.
Let's start. Just go through methodically. Tell us about the 7th of October. Take us through what happened that morning. Tell us the story.
It all happened at 6:30 in the morning. We woke up with it. We were in our pajamas, and Keith and I ran to our little shelter, and we didn't know that it would be so traumatic. That day, we thought it's just another missile that will come, and we'll be able to go back to our lives like we normally did for many, many years. We heard the whistling coming towards Kfar Aza and the alarm coming, so we ran into our little shelter and sat there. And after 2 alarms, we decided to leave and go out, and through the window from my kids' room, I saw all the missiles going to Tel Aviv, to Jerusalem, to wherever, all over the country. There were lots and lots of them. I saw them with my eyes. And the only thing that went through my mind is that I need to call my sister to tell her to hide in a shelter because they're coming to Tel Aviv. I didn't even think of what might happen to me and Keith. So we were, in 2 seconds, we were back into our little shelter, and we didn't even lock the door or close the window. And then we heard from somebody on a WhatsApp group that she can hear noises that we've never heard before. And that was Hamas terrorists killing people already. And then they said that somebody, Ophir Lipstein, was killed. And I remember looking at Keith and saying, I can't believe it. People are being killed. And there's terrorists on the kibbutz. So we locked the window and we locked the door, and Keith said that we're safe. I was shaking, and I asked my family what's happening in Israel, because we didn't have any internet, and none of them told us what's happening, and that really frightened me. And then my daughter Shir wrote, Ima and Abba, you're the strongest people in earth. And that sentence went straight into my heart, and I understood that something really big is happening. While we were sitting in the shelter, we started hearing the gun shooting coming closer and closer and closer. And we heard the Arabic from outside. And my son, Shai, that lives on the kibbutz, said that he's holding his fingers. He can hear the Arabic. And we got disconnected. I was sure for 51 days that Shai was dead. And Keith does not know yet that Shai is alive. And we sat there shaking while they started walking inside our house, and they opened the door. The door just opened like any other door, and 15 terrorists just shoved themselves inside our little shelter to see who they caught this time. What saved our lives, that Keith put his head on his knees and his hands on his head, because that's the only reason why they did not kill us, because my whole neighborhood is all dead or kidnapped.
Tell us, besides for you and Keith, tell us the casualties. Tell us what happened in Kfar Aza. What actually did the Hamas terrorists do in the kibbutz?
Keith and I did not know anything because we didn't have contact with anything. We were just like trying to figure out what's happening. And the girl that normally writes what's happening on the kibbutz, she was killed. Maybe at 7 o'clock already in the morning. So nobody wrote to us, hold the door, or be careful, or be quiet, or don't go out. So some people just went out when it was a little bit quiet, and the Hamas terrorists just shot them. So there was 2 babies, 9 months old, left in a crib while they killed both parents for 17 hours. There were 2 kids that were 7 and 8 that hid themselves in a cupboard while their mother was dead in front of them. There was a family found shot dead while they were hugging on the bed. And there were families that were burnt alive, and mothers that were raped in front of their family. And there's a family that they tried to burn them. And the mother's a doctor, and she said that they had a baby 2 years old, and she said that they need to run and put themselves into the shower. And they thought that the terrorists had left because they thought that they maybe thought that they're dead already. So they went out the shelter into the shower, and while they put the water on, the Hamas terrorists heard the water from outside, and they lit a balloon, a gas balloon from outside, and burnt them again. And they're lucky because they crawled out their house and were able to survive. The mother was unconscious for a month and a half, and their child, that's 2, is burnt all over. What happened on the 7th is beyond, and what happened on the 7th on Kfar Aza is terrible. It broke everybody into pieces. My son is alive, luckily, because they didn't go into his house, but he could have been dead like all the people that died.
Aviva, so tell us what happened to you and Keith after they entered the shelter where you were.
They were screaming as if it was a party for them. They were shooting us. They shot next to my foot, and there's bullets that you can see in my house on the floor. And they shot Keith's hand and took off part of his skin. And while they took us in such a brutal way, while they were shooting us, they pushed us, and Keith fell and they broke his ribs. And I want to tell you that in Gaza, Keith with broken ribs, bleeding, they didn't even let him lie down. He was he was in so much pain. And he used to beg them just to lie down for 5 minutes to relax his body. And they didn't. They were the meanest people in the world for doing anything they did like that to us. And the most hardest things for me were when they tortured Keith and they tortured the girls, to see Keith getting depressed because they wanted to kill him and threaten him that they're going to handcuff him and shave his body and scream at him and starve him. They used to starve us while they ate in front of us and drink while they didn't bring us any water.
How did they get you to Gaza? And what was your reception like when you got there?
It was like a party. When we left our house, I could see houses on the kibbutz on fire, and I could see lots and lots of terrorists walking around on the grass, shouting and screaming with guns. They took us in a car, in Keith's car, while there was a terrorist with a knife in front of my face, and the one in front with the gun in front of our faces. And when we arrived to Gaza, all the people were outside, shouting Allahu Akbar in Arabic, shooting in the air, happy. And when we arrived, they took us to a house, and after 4 steps in the living room, there was a hole, and we were told to go down. And I'll never, ever forget the terrorist looking at me and smiling, happy as can be, while I was shaking, and told me to go down. We were brought underneath the ground the minute that we arrived there. While Keith was in so much pain, I was shaking. He was trying to help me. I was trying to help him. And 5 other people came into the same tunnel with us. Everybody was shot. There was lots of blood on everybody. While the mother with the 2 children came down, and she said that they shot her husband and they shot her daughter in front of the kids and her. And I just said to her, maybe they didn't kill her. Maybe an ambulance will come and they'll take her and save her and save your husband. Don't even think that they did. And she looked at me and she said, no, they shot her face in front of my eyes.
Who was this? Which family was this that was killing you?
It was Chen, Agam, Tal, and Gal.
And so they put you in this tunnel. There's a whole bunch of you. What is life like? How long are you in the tunnel for? What happens to you?
We're in a tunnel that there's hardly any air there, on 3 yoga mattresses, lying on top of each other, trying to figure out what in earth are we doing there? What are we doing in Gaza with our pajamas? Keith is 65 years old. He's the sweetest, generous peacemaker that anybody can imagine. And he's still there, thrown on a mattress, just like a rug, with no human rights. Everything, every human right was taken away from us. We weren't allowed to feel. And I want everybody just to imagine one of their loved ones being hit in front of them. They would want to scream. I wanted to scream so many times when I saw them torture Keith, touch the girls, beat them with sticks, with guns in front of my eyes. And I had to just keep quiet because I wasn't allowed to feel. I used to hide myself crying on the mattress. I used to put my hand on my eyes that nobody will see that I'm crying, because they didn't let us. We weren't allowed to hug. We weren't allowed to talk. We had to just keep quiet for days and days and days while they used to eat in front of us and starve us and not bring us any water. I was dehydrated. I had infection in my stomach for most of the time I was there. When I came back, I lost 10 kilos. I could hardly walk. I had to lean on somebody. And Keith, He's there for nearly a year. He's
How
going to
long
come
were,
home like a skeleton.
how long were you held, and were you the entire time with Keith?
I was with Keith, and I was the lucky one, because I don't know what I would do if I wasn't with Keith. Like I say, if get kidnapped with Keith, because he was outstanding. He helped me so many times. I can't remember the question. What did you ask me?
I
Was
said,
with
were
Keith.
you with Keith the whole time, and how long did they hold you for?
We went. I was in Gaza for 51 days. That's 7 weeks and 2 days. Keith and I were moved 13 times in Gaza. We were up ground and down ground. One of the times they took us down ground, it was just Keith, another girl, and I, 40 meters underneath the ground. And the terrorists said, "Don't worry, city." I didn't see anybody, but they took us to a place that's small with no oxygen. And Keith and I and the girl with us were just lying there. We couldn't even talk. We were so weak, just trying to figure out how to breathe. And that's what we did for more than a couple of days, starving, left alone underneath the ground while it's dark. And I felt I'm going to die. And I want to just tell everybody that there were so many moments that I just wanted to die, because they were just terrible to us. And it was just too much for me as a human being to handle. And I can't even think about Keith, with all the strength he has, keeping alive for us to come back.
Aviva, at that moment when they told you you were going to be released, but you weren't going to be released with Keith, what went through your head?
It was terrible. It was just terrible. When they took me, I didn't know if they're going to kill me, or maybe they'll kill Keith, or if I'll ever see Keith again. And when he said that I'm going, I argued with him, and I said that I'm not going without Keith. I'm staying with Keith, and I'm not going anywhere without Keith. But he said that I have to. So I went to Keith, and I gave him a hug, and I said to him, "Please be strong for me, and I'll be strong for you." And all the time that I've been in Israel, that's what I've been doing, trying to be strong for Keith and shouting and screaming. So I'm still in Gaza, underneath the tunnels with Keith. And whenever I go outside and I see the sun and I breathe, air, just air, I feel lucky. And when I drink a cup of water, I feel lucky. And when I can cry and feel, I feel lucky. But Keith is still there, and the hostages are still there.
Aviva, I know this is enormously hard for you, but you are out. You came out. You told stories about the sexual abuse of female hostages that you witnessed before. In South Africa, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our past Minister of Foreign Affairs, the fascist jihadist Naledi Pandor, said they heard from their people in Israel that none of this happened, that there was no murdering of people, that babies were not slaughtered. I want to know what the South African government did to get you out. What pressure did South Africa do to try get you released? What have you heard from the South African government since you've been released? Tell us about our government's involvement in freeing South African hostages.
I'm not a politician. I'm sorry. I can't answer that. The only thing that I'm doing is shouting and screaming for Keith to come back and the hostages. I don't deal with any politics. I don't listen. I don't see the news. I don't see TV. All I do is talk to anybody in the world that'll help me and beg them with all my heart. It's too cruel to leave them there. What they're going through is the worst thing that any human that's alive can go through. And it shouldn't be allowed. Nobody in the world should let any human being go through what I went through and what Keith is going through and the hostages there. the 6 hostages that came home dead 2 weeks ago, and Eden Yerushalmi weighed 36 kilos. I was there. I know what's happening there. And I'm telling the truth. I would never, ever make a story like this up. And I don't think that anybody would. So people need to believe us. And what happened and what's happening is the worst ever. And I just wanted to tell you, sorry, before I go in another couple of minutes, that I want to thank everybody that lives overseas. Because once, many years ago, I used to think, how come all the Jews don't live in Israel? Because that's our country. But now I realize how important it is for you all to talk and to help us from wherever you come from. And I know that there's lots of Christians and lots of people from all over the world that aren't Jews that are trying to bring the hostages home. And evil cannot win in any place in the world. And evil is winning now. And the leaders of the world have been chosen to lead this world. People get a chance to live once, and they cannot allow the hostages to stay there underneath the ground with no oxygen, with no food, starving, and to be left there. The whole world needs to scream and shout with me. This should not be allowed. The Hamas terrorists need to let them go home. I'm begging for help.
So, Aviva, tell us how we can help you. You're off to the United States. In fact, in 4 minutes' time, you're leaving for the airport. Tell us what you're going to do there. And you've got these thousands, tens of thousands of people watching us tonight. Tell us what you want us to do. I think everyone watching us tonight wants to know how they can help you.
Scream, stand up for human rights. Girls should not be touched. People that are 65 should not be treated like Keith is treated. We can't let the evil win. The good people with hearts should stand up for this world. No place ever, if it's Israel, if it's South Africa, if it's United States, wherever people live, humans should stand up for their rights. Because my rights were taken away, and my rights are still taken away by Keith lying on the filthy, dirty mattress with not even cleaning his hands, with no water to clean his body for months and months and months, being tortured. They do what they want to. They just do what they want to, the terrorists. Okay.
Okay.
So,
2 minutes, I promise we'll let you off.
Okay.
So, Aviva, I'm going to ask everyone watching us this evening to give you a bracha, blessing, because we're heading to Rosh Hashanah now, and I think our greatest wish is to get Keith home with you for Rosh Hashanah. So I want to ask everyone to give you a message on Zoom, and we'll send these messages through to you as well, that may Keith soon be returned to you and to your entire family. But not only Keith, there are over 100 hostages still being held in the tunnels of Gaza, and they have to come home. If you were to leave us with one message, this is your opportunity to do that now.
Pray for good. Just pray for good and love. And that's all what people need. Good and love. So just love and be good to each other as much as you can. Please.
Aviva, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know telling your story is impossibly difficult and hard. It really is, but we are with you every step of your journey to get Keith and every hostage home as a matter of absolute urgency. We as the Jewish people understand that if you save one life, you save the world. And we need to go and save over 100 lives and bring the hostages home. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thanks, Aviva. Good night.
Bye.
So for those who joined us a little late, Aviva is heading off now to the United States. She's on a lobbying mission to get Keith released, and she's involving politicians and community organizations and others in the United States. And let me just get Aviva on mute there. And if I could ask Rabbi Doron Perez, if you would turn on your camera, please, we'd be very grateful to turn the discussion over to you at this point in time, Rav Perez.
I'm trying, 1 second. For some reason, I can't turn it on. Second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Let me see.
Give me one moment.
You should have received the button to
do it again. Sorry, just send it again.
Okay, ask to start video.
There you go.
Rolf, it's fantastic to see you. We can see you, and this
can
must
you see
be
me?
We can see you.
I can't see myself, so I can't see what I look like. Okay. Look, am I in the middle of the screen? I just can't see.
You're in the middle of the screen, and a big welcome to you this evening. It's just such an honor to have you on. You have gone through absolute hell. You've paid the ultimate sacrifice. You've paid the price of one of your sons. Tell us a little about you, where you come from, your South African roots, and then we'll get on to the story of what's happened over the last 11, 12 months.
Yeah, so firstly, it's always very special to be on a platform which is South African. Let's
just mute Aviva. Sorry, 1 second. Aviva, if you can hear us, if you could turn off your camera and phone. Sorry about that. Okay, I think Aviva has left us. Sorry, Rolf.
No, not at all. So it's always very special to be on a South African platform. It's obviously where I was born and where I grew up, and had the zchut of making Aliyah twice. I made Aliyah when I was 18 and studied in various yeshivot, and went to the army and the university, and came back to South Africa with Shelley and our oldest son, Jonathan, in 1999. Jonathan was 4 months old. We came back to work on behalf of the Mizrahi South African movement to be the executive director. And our 2-year shlichut in South Africa turned into 15 years, fulfilling a role both at Mizrahi movement, the Mizrahi Shul, and thereafter for the last 7 years, until 2014, the head of Yeshiva College School. And those 15 years in South Africa were unbelievable years. We also had another 3 children born in South Africa, Daniel, Adina, and Shira. And then we all made Aliyah again. Certainly Shelley and I and Jonathan made Aliyah a second time, and Daniel, Adina, and Shira in 2014. In fact, almost 10 years ago, 2 months after Daniel's bar mitzvah, had his bar mitzvah in Iyar in May. And in the middle of July, we made Aliyah into the middle of, into the eye of the storm, into the middle of suffocating, into Operation Protective Edge. And we've been here, of course, the last 10 years. And as you know, my name is Perez, but it's Perez. My father was actually born in Casablanca, and he made Aliyah in the 50s with the Moroccan Aliyah. Found his way to South Africa, met my mother, who is, like most of us South Africans, Lithuanian descent. Parents are from Lithuania and Geselta. And I grew up in Johannesburg, South Africa, with my wife growing up in Muizenberg, or as I say, to a little town outside Cape Town called Muizenberg. And and so that's our background. And of course, I'm very familiar with South African community, and I think familiar with our story and our background, having been involved for so many years in South Africa. I know that Aviva made Aliyah when she was much younger, and most of her life she's been in Israel. And whereas, we've spent significant stints in my life, both growing up and then serving the community in South Africa. So we've been back this time for 10 years.
In fact, I see someone posted on the chat a few moments ago that you were the best teacher that they had ever had in South Africa. But Rolf, tell us about the 7th of October. Describe that day to us.
Mm-hmm. So I assume that many people in South Africa are familiar with our story. So I'll try and,
Rolf, can I say there are many people, and there are tens of thousands of people watching us tonight. There'll be many people who maybe won't know your story.
Okay. So for those who do forgive me, so, as I said, we made Aliyah. We moved to Israel 10 years ago, and with our children, Jonathan and Daniel, who were then 15 and 13, and our daughters, Adina and Shira, who were then 10 and 6. Fast forward to the 7th of October to Simchat Torah. Both Jonathan and Daniel are now, our two boys, are 24 and 22 respectively. They've both been in Israel for 10 years. They've both finished high school, gone to yeshiva, gone to Jonathan to a yeshiva for 2 years, and Daniel for a year. Both went into the army, into combat units, Jonathan into paratroopers, Daniel into tanks. They both continued as commanders, and then both went to officers' course. The most extensive course in Israel is the officers' course, an eight-month officers' course, which you thereafter have to sign on in the army. So comes October 7th, Daniel has been over 3 years in the army. He's a tanker commander, an officer of a tank, positioned with his crew on the Gaza border in the base called Nahal Oz, adjacent to Kibbutz Nahal Oz, and not very far from Kfar Aza that Aviva was speaking about. And that's where he was in the morning. Jonathan was at home with his then fiancée, Dalia, in our home here in Yad Binyamin, where I'm speaking from. Unfortunately, by the end of the day, we had Daniel missing, and we had Jonathan injured in hospital. So the day was a very harrowing day. We actually didn't know what was going on. We were from 6:30 in the morning, we were in the air raid shelters like most people in Israel who were within range. After an hour and a half of missile after missile, it did seem like a lot of missiles, but it didn't. It seemed a bit unusual, but it's missiles. There's Iron Dome, and we can go into our air raid shelters. Then Jonathan got a WhatsApp. His phone as an officer is on Shabbat. He's a commander of new recruits in the paratroopers, and they were all out for Shabbat. So he was with us with his fiancée 10 days before his wedding. And his phone just kept pinging and pinging. Eventually, he felt something was going on. He had to look at it, and it was understanding that it had been infiltration, probably from Gaza. They weren't sure. And then he got a WhatsApp from his commanding officer, the brigade commander, the head of his base, of all the paratrooper new recruits, which said any officer who can should come to Sderot because things are going on. He literally, in 3 seconds, he was dressed. He ran out in 3 seconds. I tried to stop him because I didn't understand what it meant when his commanding officer says anybody who can should come. I said, Jonathan, what is that? Anyone who can should come. And besides, you, the officer of new recruits, what are you running off to Sderot for? None of us could imagine what was going on. Obviously we keep Shabbat, so our phones were not on. And I think at that time, nobody knew what was going on. He didn't even have his gun with him. I said, but you don't even have your gun with you. He said, anyone who's got a gun. He said, Dad, I've got a handgun. And he took Daniel's handgun from the safe. His M16 he had left at the base, which he never did, but because it was Simchat Torah and he was going to be dancing afterwards, what they call hakafot shniot, for a second hakafot. So he didn't take his gun with him, but he literally ran out with his gun, Daniel's gun. At 4:30 in the afternoon, I must say, for the next 6 or 7 or 8 hours, I wasn't particularly worried because we didn't know what was going on. What could possibly be going on. And as the day went on, we started hearing rumors of infiltration and even hospitals being filled. I started getting a little bit concerned. I'd heard from somebody who said that he had heard that it infiltrated into army bases. I said, it can't be. The understanding in Israel and certainly in the military establishment, but in general, was that there's not going to be any type of infiltration and certainly no invasion from Gaza. By 4:30, my phone and Shelley's phone were ringing and ringing and ringing. Eventually, we just had to answer it, even though it was Shabbat, from lots of different numbers for half an hour. I realized something not good was going on. I answered the phone, and it was Jonathan on the other end saying, Dad, just listen to me. I'm actually in my study right now. So I walked into my study, so I just could talk to him alone. And he said to me, Dad, I've been shot in the leg, but listen to me, I'm okay. You can hear my voice. I said, where have you been shot? In the thigh? If you get shot in the thigh, it can be fatal if you hit in the main artery. He said, no, Dad, it went in and out the leg. It didn't hit my artery. I've had an operation. I'm okay, or I'm being operated. I can't remember what he said. He said, Dad, 3 things I want to tell you. One, I can't explain to you what's going on here. You cannot imagine. It's like the Wild West. I just can't tell you. Just bodies everywhere. Every 50 meters, somebody dead in the road. I just can't explain to you. Number one, he said. Number two, he's concerned about Daniel. He said he's been trying since 8 o'clock in the morning to get hold of Daniel since he left the house. He did say that when he went into the Nachal Oz base, it ended up that Jonathan, after 6 hours, 5 hours at around 1 o'clock, ended up commanding a group of paratroopers, officers who went in to retake Nachal Oz base. It just worked out that way. And he said, Dad, when I went into Nachal Oz base, I saw that Daniel's tank was not there. So we hoped that he was, at that stage, that he was okay and he was got the protection of his tank, most advanced tanks in the world. And he thirdly said he's just very worried about his family, because his wife's family, they're from opposite the road of Kfar Aza, is Kibbutz Saad. He said he didn't know at that point that they had not gone into Saad. He knew that there'd been terrible penetrations in Kfar Aza across the road. And as Providence would have it, or Kfar Aza was terribly attacked, as we heard from Aviva, and Saad, for some reason, they didn't manage to get into. And basically, I said to him that I'd talk to him after Shabbat. After Shabbos, I went to Soroka Hospital in Beersheba with his fiancée. I'd never seen such a thing. The amount of soldiers and injured. It was, even though Jonathan had I think 15 or 20 stitches, there was no bed for him. There was no crutches. There was no wheelchair. They just simply had run out of space. I literally walked around the hospital to see if I could perhaps find Daniel. There were a number of other families also looking for their family members, soldiers, and unfortunately wasn't there. Jonathan eventually came home that night because I just saw he didn't have a bed, even though he couldn't feel his leg. He had been shot through the leg and he had no feeling in it. Our neighbor is our family doctor, and we made a game time decision to bring him home and release him from hospital because he wouldn't get the care that he needed there. It was an absolute balagan. She said she'll treat him from the house. We also had an emergency medicine nurse who's a friend of ours, so they literally came and changed his wounds and they treated him from the home. So literally by the end of the day, Jonathan is back at home. He should have been in hospital, but he didn't have a bed there, lying in pain after his injury in his bed. And Daniel was missing. We didn't know his whereabouts. That's how we finished October 7th, Simchat Torah.
And what did you find subsequently about Daniel? Because there was hope at that point in time that he may be alive.
Yeah, so he was missing. He was missing for the first 2 weeks. In fact, one of the first people that I met, for the first 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, Daniel was missing. The army came to knock on the door 5 days later on the Thursday to tell us that officially Daniel was missing. We actually knew that was the case because Jonathan on the Sunday spent the entire day trying to phone everybody who could to find out about Daniel. Eventually, he spoke to an officer who said that they went to the tank, and it's Daniel's tank for sure. It was outside the kibbutz outside the base of Nachal Oz, and they said there was one dead soldier in the tank and 3 who are not in the tank. Jonathan asked if the dead soldier is the officer, and they said no. So we knew that thankfully it was not him dead in the tank. He asked where the others are, and they said they don't know, they're missing. So we're already on the Sunday late afternoon. It was a very, very harrowing moment when we heard that. We all came and huddled as a family. We were all together with Jonathan and Galia and Shira and Adina and Shira and Shelly. It was a very, very hard moment for the first time knowing for sure. So it seemed that he's in harm's way, that someone's dead in the tank and that he's not there. So we feared the worst. We only heard 2 weeks later that he was indeed presumed to be taken captive. When I went to the first meeting that I had of hostage families, I actually met Aviva's daughter Shir. I went up to her and I chatted to her, and I heard about that her father, because I'd heard that both of her parents were hostage, and we actually had a connection with her boyfriend or husband Yuval. We were in touch with a lot because they were also thinking whether to go the South African route or the American route in terms of citizenship. So I've been in touch with Shir, not so much with Aviva. She was, of course, captive, for the first 51 days, but with Shir and Yuval. And basically that, so essentially what we knew about Daniel was that he was missing. 2 weeks later, presumed taken captive, then confirmed taken captive, Then a month later, having done DNA testing, they told us that the blood that they found in and around the tank and on the uniform is indeed Daniel's uniform. So we knew that he had been injured after about 5 weeks. I must say that was another very, very difficult moment, because I always felt personally that Daniel, being very strong physically, emotionally, mentally, I felt that if he survived the first day, he would be okay. Hamas need him. He's a strong young man. It might take a while, but he'll be okay. In Hamas's world, he's unfortunately the horrific world of Hamas, as we heard about now from Viva, this just horrific world of no human rights and abuse of a person's humanity in the most unthinkable way. That he would hopefully survive and come home. So, but once we heard he was injured, we were firstly devastated that he, if he was alive, which we hoped he was, and there was no indication that he wasn't, he would be trying to survive as somebody injured. And you don't know, even if he comes back, please God, alive, you don't know what you get back. And on day 163, on the 17th of March, we were told that he unfortunately was deceased, based on video evidence that was seen in Sajia, in the eastern suburb of Gaza City, Sajia. And we heard from the members of the Shin Bet, the Israeli military intelligence, and the chief rabbinate of the army, that the evidence is unequivocal. He's seen, in certain videos that it's definitely him, and he's unfortunately definitely deceased. We were grateful to know that there was a gunshot in the back of his neck, which meant that the doctor and the rabbi said he didn't suffer. He was probably killed, certainly wounded, maybe even mortally, already at 9 o'clock in the morning. We know that Daniel, in fact, they allowed us once his death was confirmed, we had the funeral the next day in Jerusalem. He's buried on Har Herzl, even though we don't have his body. We are saying, in inverted commas, we're one of the luckier ones of those 40 who've been declared dead. Most of them don't have anything to bury, and they haven't had a funeral. I mean, they've sat shiva, most of them, because there's been confirmation of their loved one's death. But Daniel, we were, so to speak, in inverted commas, lucky that although we suffered through the knowledge that he was injured, in the end we had something to bury. So the fact that we could bury something was a bracha, in that we have a grave. Shelley and I were there yesterday. We go regularly. And the fact that we've got somewhere to go, as painful as it is, we have somewhere to go. A lot of families do not. In our own tank, Itai Chen, who was declared dead a week before Daniel, has no grave.
Sorry, Rob, what do you mean that you buried something?
In Jewish law, if you have a part of the body or even blood, you have to bury it. So we had of Daniel's, the army had blood found in the tank, which they kept, blood outside of the tank, and blood on his uniform. There was quite a substantial amount of blood on his left arm and on his sort of upper body, so in the uniform. So that had to be buried. The question was, do you need to do a funeral? You don't have to do a funeral, because you only have to do a funeral when a person's body comes back. So there was no obligation to do a funeral, but we had to bury whatever we had, the army would bury it. But it could have been buried on the side somewhere and not a funeral. The army chief rabbi strongly urged us to do a funeral. I liaised with our rabbis, Shelley and I, and we decided as a family to go ahead. The only debate not to do a funeral was, not wanting to, so to speak, give the state a pass that we accept the fact that he has a grave. At the end of the day, we don't have his body, and he still needs to be brought back for Kever Israel. And when that comes back, I say, in what world do we live that we're hoping for a funeral? Because when his body does come back, and we hope soon, we'll have to have another funeral and sit partially shiver as well. And but so the decision to be made halachically and practically was, should we have a funeral where we don't have his body, but we just have the blood on these different uniform and other parts? So we decided to go ahead and have the funeral, firstly to honor him, and secondly to give some type of closure, that we have a place to go to, because you don't know how long it takes to get closure, and you don't know, the Golden family's waited 10 years. And we hope and pray that of the 101 hostages, of course, which him and Oron Shaul and others are part of, that everyone will come home very soon. So that was the decision, to actually have the funeral even though we only had minimal parts of his blood, but we decided to do that. And but it subsequently worked out from the videos, which I haven't seen, where they declared Daniel's death, but those who have seen it, that the blood in his uniform is probably from a shot to the back of the head and by the neck, and which probably he may have died from soon thereafter, which means that he didn't suffer. It means that he was never alive in the hands of Hamas. You don't know what to wish for. You heard what Keith is going through and what Aviva went through and what so many hostages are going through. I was in a meeting on Sunday with the chief of staff with the families of the soldier hostages. The ones who I'm closest to are the families of the soldiers, not only the soldiers in Daniel's tank, but all the soldiers, because we lobby together for a very simple reason, not just because we're soldiers, because Hamas want to do everything to leave men to the end, and for sure to leave soldiers to the end. So on any possible negotiation and list male soldiers, a male soldier officer is in the back of every list. So therefore we decided to lobby together as families of soldiers. So we had a meeting with the chief of staff on Sunday to update us. And in that meeting, I can't actually remember what I was saying and why I raised that about the chief of staff, but I don't wanted to make a certain point about the chief of staff. I can't remember. Anyway, the bottom line is at Daniel's, that's what was buried, and he still needs to come back for a Kever Yisrael. I'll say one other thing is that after the Shiva, the army let us listen to the black box of the tank, the audio of the last 2 hours and 16 minutes of Daniel's life. What is unusual about this is that it's very tragic to listen to the last 2 hours and 16 minutes of your son's life. You know how it's going to end, and it's very tragic. On the other hand, you're listening to the last 2 hours and 16 minutes of your son's life. You're listening to the decisions he made. You're listening to incredible bravery, clarity of thought, courageousness, teamwork. And he fought for 2 hours against the first wave of the Nukhba terrorists, killed many, and fought in and outside of Nachal Oz. And then at around that, from 7:15 till 9:15. And then the critical moment came at 9:15, when he saw a second wave of terrorists coming in, 50 to 60 of them with each one with an RPG, knowing full well that he was the last line of defense and knowing full well that each one of them is a killing machine. He didn't get a command. He could have stayed where he was in the safety of his tank position outside Kibbutz Nachal Oz, but he made the brave and courageous decision straight away to leave his tank position, to go straight at them, to try and stop as many as possible, kill as many as possible. And they did. They managed to do that. We know that Daniel had to put his head out the tank in order to hold his machine gun. And it seems that all 3,000 bullets of his machine gun were used. So they literally fought to the end, and until eventually the tank was overrun. And unfortunately, Daniel, Itai Chen, and Tomer Leibovitz were killed. By the time Itai and Daniel were taken across the border, they were both deceased. And we hope and pray that Matan, who was taken alive, is still alive and will come out soon. His parents released a audio-visual recording of his from a number of months ago. They've been very reticent to publicize anything about him, but they changed their mind because they, I remember what I wanted to say with the chief of staff. I wanted to go there. One of the families of one of the soldiers said one of the mothers was talking about her son who's been 11 and a half months in Gaza. And she said, I now don't know what's better, that he would have died in the beginning, or as a mother saying, I don't know what's better now, having so much hope to bring him back, but knowing that the soldiers are at the end and knowing that he's been alive, she doesn't know what is a better fate, because the excruciating pain that we went through for 163 days, and for families who have gone through now for almost a year, of especially those who know that their children were alive, and Aviva who knows what her husband's been through, the knowledge that you have a family member who is definitely alive, or certainly was definitely alive, and please God is still alive, is just an unimaginable, unthinkable, indescribable pain. And one doesn't know, there's so many layers and types of suffering and pain that people have. But Daniel, as I said, by the time he went across, I was talking about Matan. So the reason Matan's parents have been prepared now to publicize is because they understand that even though he was injured quite badly, he's not on any humanitarian list. Hamas will not negotiate for soldiers at the moment. They won't be part of any first stage. So that's, I think, a very, very difficult reality. So they've chosen to be more vocal, publicize his picture, and speak out about it. So we hope and pray for the return of Matan Shachar Ben Anat, along with all of the live hostages, and of course with our son, Daniel Shimon Ben Sharon. And we thank you all, so many people who are praying for him and davening for him and thinking of us. And we appreciate it immensely that him and all the others who require a dignified burial should come home to Kever Yisrael.
Rav, in the middle of all of this terrible tragedy and the uncertainty at the time, your other son, your injured son, Jonathan, got married. Tell us about that decision. Was it a hard decision to make at a time like that?
Sometimes in life, Howard, I think decisions make themselves. I don't know how we made that decision. My wife, Shelley, is incredibly courageous. She felt very strongly that as a young couple who are planning to get married, a religious couple, they should get married. Once we heard on the Thursday that Daniel, so to speak, was definitely missing in action, meaning we knew what we knew, I asked the officer who told us, and he's become part of our family, Yossi Shemesh, I asked him, he's our liaison with the army. I said to him, Yossi, how long is Daniel's status of missing likely to be? He said, for a couple of weeks. So that made me feel, at least if we go forward with the wedding, we won't have a funeral as well, which was plaguing me very much, especially since we needed to change the wedding plans from a big wedding in Ashkelon, and Shelley's, our friends in Yad Binyamin, Shelley's got, and we have an unbelievable group of friends, and all these ladies were going to get together, many of them South Africans, Revis and Kerry Podlashuk, Nikki Simon, Wendy Seif or Daniela Seif, Yael Fager, and I don't want to leave anyone out, Candy Engel, and others, who all sort of really made such an effort to within 4 or 5 days to organize a wedding, which was really, really challenging. So to go to all this trouble to order, change plans, organize a wedding when you may have a funeral, God forbid, was really, really difficult. In fact, I asked our army liaison 2 days before the wedding that if he does receive any news about Daniel, please not to tell us till after the wedding. I checked it halachically. I said, please just don't tell us, withhold it, so we can get through the wedding. And as it turned out, so I think the decision made itself mainly through Shelley's clarity. I think it took a while for Jonathan and Dalia, the bride and groom, to make sure that we were okay with it. Yes, Daniel's missing as Jonathan's brother, but he's also our son. And I think her parents wanted to make sure we were okay with it, and we were. And Shelley was incredibly brave. I saw when we sort of, I'll just maybe say one coping mechanism that I had. Once we made the decision, I made a decision that I was not going to think about Daniel throughout the wedding. I was too scared to. It's still hard for me to walk into his room and to look at pictures of him. And it was just too difficult. And I said, if I'm going to think about Daniel, if I'm going to focus on him, how can one possibly have a wedding with a son missing and God knows what's happening to him? But so I decided the way that I was going to get through it was by not thinking about Daniel. And even though it probably wasn't the most mature thing to do, it's the only coping mechanism that I knew. I said, how am I going to hold Daniel's predicament and then celebrate Jonathan? So I said, the way I'm going to hold it is by putting it away and burying it sort of, in a drawer, and I'll take it out after the wedding again. Shelley very much wanted to go into Daniel's room and to feel his suit. Daniel's our stylish child, and bought a beautiful suit for the wedding and beautiful shoes. And Shelley very much wanted to feel his presence and feel it. It was excruciating for me. I didn't want to go into the room, but I did. And when we came out, we were both in tears. And I said, Shell, let's focus on what we have. We have Jonathan. Let's just focus on him. I tried to win her over to my coping mechanism, which is just to think about Jonathan and not Daniel. But my little plan came crashing down when we stood under the chuppah, a beautiful chuppah which Jonathan hobbled to, and he came under the chuppah with 150 of our close family and some friends. And under the chuppah, our rabbi, the rabbi of our community, Rabbi Hillel Merzbach, himself, an army chaplain had come from the north and knows Daniel well, started the wedding in tears, saying the chuppah, saying, how can we begin this wedding without acknowledging the person who's not here? And he started crying. I remember looking at him at disbelief, thinking, like, what is he doing? Like my whole defense was crumbling. And then he started talking about Daniel and crying. And then I burst out crying and all of us broke down. And then we davened for Daniel. And those couple of minutes were really excruciating. But then an amazing thing happened. We had to get on with the wedding. That's what we were there for. So I took some tissues, I wiped my tears, and I came to bring them to Shelley. And I saw Shelley was actually stronger than me. She had she calls her posse of friends around her, looking after her. And we somehow managed to put a smile back in our faces and have an amazing wedding. And one of our friends, I quote all the time, Tammy Goldberg, a close friend, said that the wedding for her was the most holy, which was the holiest, saddest, happiest, most uplifting wedding she'd ever been at. But I say for Shelley and I, it was the happiest wedding. When I think back, it was an absolutely joyous wedding, tinged with some of the saddest moments in my life. Those 3 minutes were incredibly painful. Some other moments were painful, but they were not the overwhelming, even minority of the wedding. The wedding was a happy, happy wedding, tinged with moments of enormous yearning and pain. But we got through it. And not only in one piece, but I learned a tremendous lesson that it's possible to carry angst and pain along with gratitude and happiness. It's possible to carry so much blessing with some curse in our belly. It's possible. It's possible. And we continue in that vein until today. I said in one of the talks I gave recently that at my father's 85th birthday, should live and be well until 120. It was the first time 3 months ago that all of the grandchildren were together and my parents home. And at the moment, my sister said, let all the grandchildren come and have a picture with Grandpa Gil. And all the grandsons were there, all except for Daniel. And it was such a painful moment that Shelley just burst out crying, had to leave the room. And I also was in such pain, we had to leave the room. And my sister came up to me and said, look, Laurence, or Doron, she called me Laurence. She said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I said to her, I don't know where this line came from, but I said to her, Ariella, you've got nothing to be sorry for. Grandpa Gil deserves all the sympathy in the world with what we have been through, and he should have a picture like we always do with all of the grandchildren. We cannot deny Grandpa Gil the happiness of having his grandchildren around him. But Shelley and I can't be denied the right to break down and feel the pain of the moment. And then a line came out of my mouth, which is a line I've been using since then. I said to her, at least I remember saying to her, I'm not sure if I actually said it to her, I have to ask her, but I remember saying it to her, and I'm quoting it as such. I said, how I processed this in my own mind was, it's Ariella, it's okay. It's so not okay. It'll never be okay, but it's okay. It's okay. Things really are so not okay, but they really are okay. And I think that is the dichotomy of life. And that is the paradigm of the wedding that we celebrated with such sadness and pain. And as we move through all the celebrations in life, we expect them to be tinged with so much pain. But we're okay. We're okay. We're not okay, but we really are okay.
Rav, you're a rabbi. That's your profession. Your profession is one of faith. But faith is, in fact, the gift. And I'm continuously reminded that after Mother Teresa passed away, they revealed all the letters that she had written to the various popes about the crisis of faith that she went through at every moment, seeing the great suffering in the slums of India and the prostitutes who she mentored and she tried to heal in a place. And you understand that even people of the greatest faith have a crisis of faith on a regular basis. Has there been a crisis of faith in your life? How do you explain you've done so much good in the world? You've given and contributed so much to so many people. Is there a crisis of faith now?
Well, I'll talk on my own behalf. I feel very grateful every day that I don't, at the moment, feel any anger, have any crisis of faith. I don't, and I just feel blessed. I certainly would not judge for a moment anyone who does. And had I have that crisis of faith, it would be understandable. And many people do, and many people are in that situation. I don't know why. I just know that I feel blessed that I don't. I don't know why. I don't know why. I just feel a blessing every day that within the excruciating pain and difficulty, there isn't a crisis of faith. I don't have questions also. I'm talking about me. I don't have questions. I don't have questions because I feel if you open up the tap or the funnel of questions, then there are a lot of questions to ask. Is the suffering for one son, as horrific as it is, does that compare to the suffering of my friend Rabbi Shmuel Slotky, who lost 2 sons in one day? About pair people who've lost more than one family member and have others who are hostages, about families which were wiped out in the Shoah. You know, I almost feel for me, I'm just processing for me, it's a little bit of a chutzpah to take myself so seriously that I'm in pain and I'm suffering, and look at the suffering that so many others and people have been through. Look at the pain and suffering. And I feel blessed that I feel this way. I just feel blessed that I do. And I think we're part of a people which have been through so much suffering. And for me, it hasn't crossed my mind. I'm talking about me. It hasn't crossed my mind to think for a moment that I've tried to do so much good for people. And how does this happen? Who am I at the end of the day? I'm saying, who am I? Does God owe me something? You know, I think that's part of the problem, is that we go through life thinking that God owes us. I always say, for me, that if you're going to ask questions, you can ask questions, but then you need to ask all the questions. You also have to ask, why did God give you so much blessing in your life? Why did God give you so much health? Why did God give you so much blessing? We somehow wake up in the morning and take that for granted and only have questions when things don't go well. And when things do, we take it for granted, like that famous joke of the person desperately looking for a parking, as we always are in Israel all the time. You're desperately looking for a parking. And you know, if you don't get that parking, you're going to be late for a meeting, you're going to have consequences. And you say, God, please give me a parking. Please give me a parking. Please give me a parking. I really need it. I really need it. And all of a sudden somebody pulls out, and you say to God, oh God, don't worry, I found a parking, somebody pulled out. Meaning, when you don't have a parking, then all of a sudden you need God, you've got questions, help me God, and you're dependent. And when you do have a parking, well, that's just the way it is. God didn't give it to me, it just happened. So I just feel, for me, Howard, a tremendous blessing within this curse that I feel this way. I've seen that pain does not have to equal anger. It doesn't have to equal criticism. It doesn't have to equal blame. Pain does not have to translate into that. It's understandable if it does. And all of us are grieving in different ways. I'm talking about half of myself. I just feel somehow lucky, in inverted commas, that if I was and am called upon by God for some reason that we'll never understand to go through this, I feel a measure of blessing that I'm able to handle it in this way until now. And I take nothing for granted. That I feel something now until today, it doesn't mean that how it's going to be in the future. Who knows what a person, one can never be presumptuous in life. The article I think I'm going to write for the Hamizrahi magazine, which is coming out soon, is the following, and maybe I'll just end with this. I'll just say that it's an article that I'm just writing at the moment. You know, we say on the Unatana Tokef, the fervent prayers on the high holy days, we say, we say that teshuva, repentance, utfilah, prayer, repentance, and charity, tzedakah, revoke the evil decree. But people die every day. And we see with all of our prayers, it doesn't always seem to work. It was decreed on Rosh Hashanah, the last time I davened next to Jonathan and Daniel together. It was decreed for some reason that will be Daniel's last Rosh Hashanah, for reasons we don't understand. But I think to myself, if I can accept for some reason that Jonathan, thank God, is saved, and that Daniel, this was going to be his last Rosh Hashanah, if I can accept that, I found that once I accept that harsh decree, I feel lucky. I feel lucky that Daniel died at the best time in his life, where all of our relationships were intact. We loved him dearly. He loved us. By the way, he was convinced that he was Shelley's favorite. Shelley's definitely a better parent than me, because by and large, all of our children are convinced that they are her favorite. It's not the same with me. They're convinced that I've got some particular favorites, which I feel that I'm just getting it out there, that I've done nothing to give them that impression, and I've really tried my hardest not to. But they don't necessarily see that, and they said they're all okay with it. But with Shelley, Daniel was one of the children who were absolutely convinced that he was Shelley's favorite, and that we all, our relationship were intact. I feel blessed that if he was to pass away, that he did it making a decision freely and on his own to leave his tank position. I feel blessed that he saved countless tens, maybe hundreds of lives. We had a number of families from Kibbutz Nachal Oz which came to. Shelley says that the most comforting moment of the Shiva was when two families came from Nachal Oz in tears to thank us, to say that they feel that the 130 children of the Kibbutz Nachal Oz and all those who were saved, it's largely, certainly partially in merit to the actions of Daniel and his crew. So the fact that he saved people in his last moments, the fact that it's in an independent state of Israel, the fact that it's in sync with my deepest values, I feel is so much blessing in that, with people who their death doesn't happen that way. And I feel they have so much bigger nisayon than I have had. And I recalled when our dear friend Nathaniel Fagenbaum passed away, and it's his yard site. I recall that our friends Roy and Bev. I recall the rabbi of Bev's sister, Rabbi Shmuel Silber. He gave a yard site shir or shloshim shir for Nathaniel, and I wish Bev and Roy long life and the whole family. It's around this time. And I remember that Rabbi Silber said something that I never forgot. Rabbi Silber said that Rav Soloveitchik asked the question. We say utshuva, utfila, utzdaka, ma'avirin ra gzera, and as I said, and repentance and prayer and charity change the evil decree. But the words in Hebrew are not change the evil decree. That would be ma'avirin et hagzera hara'ah. It doesn't say ma'avirin et hagzera hara'ah, the evil decree. It says ma'avirin et ro'a hagzera, the evil of the decree. Like, why not talk normal Hebrew and say gzera ra'ah? Why? It removes the evil of the decree. And Rav Soloveitchik said something so profound that I think I only understood it this year, painfully, but I understood it. Rav Soloveitchik says that sometimes you can't change the evil decree. We live in God's world, not ours. Sometimes we just don't have all the chips. We don't have all the variables. We just don't know what cheshbonot and what calculations there are. Sometimes we can't. But there's one thing you can always change. There's one thing that repentance and prayer and charity can always change. They can change the evil of the decree. There's evil in the world, as unfortunately we heard, Viva talking about. And if there is going to be a terrible decree, there's a terrible decree, but there's also evil within that decree. And I feel, for all the reasons I tried to articulate, there was so much kindness and chesed in this decree that other people, I think, have bigger nisyonot. So in life, I think you've got to choose your thoughts. If you compare yourself to people who this hasn't happened to them, then it's going to be immeasurably more difficult. But look around and see how many other people have suffered throughout Jewish history and are suffering, and they've got through it. And all of our avot and imahot had so much suffering, our forebears, and so much what they've been through, and we here to tell the tale. And I think, unfortunately, our generation is now joined with the normative generations of Jewish history. But I will say that we are absolutely lucky and blessed to live in a state of Israel, to have the opportunity to defend ourselves. You know, a pogrom like this, which happened, it's the worst pogrom that's happened since the Shoah. But as opposed to all the pogroms that happened then, for the first time in a long time, we could get up. And yes, unfortunately, our son paid the ultimate price, and we're still suffering with him being a hostage. But we were able to fight back. Yes, we've got 101 hostages to bring out, and the pain is immeasurable. And yes, there's been so much death and so much difficulty. And yes, we still face many question marks. But we have an independent state of Israel. We have a strong army. We have an incredible people. We have Hashem. And Bezrat Hashem, we are prevailing and will prevail. Yes, there's so much still to do, as we've heard from Aviva, and there's so much pain. But when these things happened in yesteryear, there was little we could do about it. Today, thank God, we've still got our challenges. There's still major international, pieces that we have to sort of try, do all the diplomacy. It's not only about military prowess, but I think we are privileged that if such a pogrom is going to happen when we've got the ability to fight back, and for 11 and a half months fighting evil with a single-mindedness, to fight this Amalekite type evil of people who, Rav Soloveitchik says that the footprints of Amalek are where Amalek is no longer a people that don't exist, but there's an ideology. The ideology of Amalek is absolute evil, and its footprints is when people do what Amalek did. What Amalek do? We just read it in the parsha last week. What did they do? Amalek went for the weak, the infirm, the children, the elderly. When it's not combatant to God's combatant, when it's not regular war, when you don't agree with any Geneva Convention, where you simply want to kill civilians, you have no respect for the civilians of your enemy, no respect for your own civilians, and you do the worst acts, which is simply steal civilians, steal 10-month-old children like Kfir Bibas, and steal elderly people, and steal Keith and people like this. When this is the world that we live in, boy, oh boy, we have our work before us. But to have an independent state of Israel with an army that, according to the Rambam, the mitzvah of fighting evil and fighting the source of absolute evil is incumbent upon a Jewish king, meaning it's a collective mitzvah upon the Jewish people as a sovereign people, and that the fact that we have the opportunity, for the sake of our children, for the sake of the 101 hostages, for the sake of the Jewish people going forward, and for the sake of all humanity for that matter, to have the ability to uproot evil and to fight back is something which is not to be taken for granted. None of this brings back Daniel. None of this takes the pain away. And none of this, changes the reality. But it certainly does, as Viktor Frankl say, give meaning and purpose and depth and resilience to somehow suffer less. I believe you can't stop pain, but you can control, to an extent, the measure of suffering. And I feel blessed that there's so much blessing within this terrible curse. And we're just trying our best to process it and get strength and give strength.
Rav, you've been a true inspiration tonight, and I'm going to ask everyone watching us to leave you a message, and I'll send you the messages. I know you fly off to the United Kingdom tomorrow early, so I'm going to ask everyone to please leave you a message, and we'll pass those messages on. But I think you've gifted us tonight with some of the most remarkable inspiration that I think many people may never have heard, because all you hear is pain, and the natural response to pain is anger and judgment and hurt. And I think you've taught us a great lesson of enormous compassion this evening. So thank you so much for joining us, Laurence. It's just, under these circumstances, terrible to see you, but so inspirational and remarkable to see you as well. So thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Amen. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you. And Dalia, I'm going to ask you to turn on your camera, and to Michael Cranstorff to turn on his camera as well. We're going to show very, very shortly just a short video, a 4-minute video of the hostage program that the JNF, together with the base and Saul Jasinowski, has been running over the last few months, because I think that in itself is just another remarkable indication of our community and what we've managed to achieve during the process.
At this dark hour in Israel's history, the South African Jewish community has mobilized to provide hope to those most affected by October 7th and the ongoing war with Hamas. Through a joint initiative between the JNF and the base community, we have been able to provide respite and healing to returned hostages and hostage families in South Africa. Sapir Cohen and her brother Aviv, Amos Horn and his family, and Amit Susana, all victims of the horrific attacks in Israel or captured on October 7th, have endured unimaginable suffering. Sapir Cohen, one of the many innocents taken captive, was thrust into a terrifying and alien world. Her captivity in Gaza was a struggle for survival, with weeks spent separated from her family, home, and the life she once knew. The Horn family faces a similar ordeal. Amid the violence in Gaza, Eitan and Yair Horn remain captive, held by Hamas, leaving their brother Amos and their family in a state of despair. Together, they have clung to hope and solidarity in the face of their unimaginable plight. Amit Susana was also taken during the attacks, and like the others, endured days of fear and violence in a foreign land, unsure of her future. After many harrowing weeks, she finally returned to her family in Israel.
Hello everybody, my name is Amit Susana. I'm a released hostage. I was in Gaza for 55 long days, and now I'm in South Africa. During my entire time in captivity, I somehow managed to keep my faith alive. That was the main thing that kept me going. Thank you all very much. I'm having a wonderful experience here. I never thought life could be like this.
While their captivity has left deep scars, their brief time in South Africa has provided a much-needed reprieve. In the warmth of this new community, they have found a space to rest, reflect, and begin healing. Yet even as they experience moments of peace, the ongoing conflict in Israel looms large in their minds. Their loved ones remain at risk, and their homeland remains engulfed in violence. Though physically free, the memories of their captivity continue to weigh heavily on them. Their future, like that of many others, remains uncertain. Nevertheless, this period of respite has brought them support, love, and strength from a community that stands in solidarity with them. They carry with them a deep sense of resilience and gratitude for the compassion they have received in South Africa. They are not merely survivors of conflict, but symbols of human endurance and hope.
Rabbi Aaron Zolberg, you join us as well. If I can ask everyone just to unmute for a second. Aaron, you've been together with the JNF running this campaign to bring survivors, to bring hostages to South Africa, to bring the families of hostages to South Africa. I'm going to put up at the moment a screen that will allow people who would like to support this project to in fact be able to make a contribution and to donate some money in order to bring hostages to South Africa, their families, both for rest and respite, but also to educate our community and the general community about what is happening in Israel, the human rights violations that the Israelis are being subject to by the terrorists from Hamas, to spread the word. And in fact, we were all together a few weeks ago when we hosted a huge gathering of church leaders and foreign diplomats to support the hostages. Aaron, as people maybe point their cameras at the 3D barcode on the screen at the moment in order to make a donation to this project, or take down the details, maybe a photograph of the Standard Bank account in order to support this project, Help us, talk us through this initiative quickly.
Living here in South Africa, we really felt like, what can we really do? Beyond the obvious, which maybe isn't, to be good, to be kind, and to be better. This project was born, and we realized that we can really do something that can assist people that are quite literally at the epicenter of what has occurred. We can make a difference. We can certainly change the perspective of South Africa in Israel. We can share our beautiful community. We can share that different perspective, and we can really impact these people in a really positive way. We've already had a tremendous impact. If we had more time, it would be really special to share the stories of those that have participated on our trips. We have so many more trips planned in the future this year and also for next. And in truth, even though this is an unbelievable partnership between two wonderful organizations, the JNF and the base, and really wonderful people, the truth is this really is a project of our South African community, and it's a tremendous opportunity that we have to really make a difference to these people in a positive way.
So, Michael, we're going to be talking to Dalia in South Africa. She was recently in South Africa. How has the reception been? And we'll get Dalia to talk about that as well. But how's the reception been when we've brought hostage and hostage families to South Africa?
I think the reception's been amazing. For them, Dalia can talk about it, but I'm struck always by what Sapira Cohen said, who was one of the first hostages that we brought with the base to South Africa. She was, nervous, understandably, because the perception of South Africa and Israel is so bad about coming, and she was very brave to come, to be honest. And when she arrived and she drove into Glen Hazel and she saw all of the yellow ribbons that we'd also done as a joint project with the base around Glen Hazel, she started crying in the car. She couldn't believe that people, so far away, were so concerned and cared so much about the fate of the hostages. And I think, that goes to the heart of our community, of what we stand for. We stand with Israel. We care about Am Yisrael. And, the hostage families are hurting, and we want to help. And we think that we have a unique opportunity here to bring them to a warm, caring community. I'd like to say that, many of the hostage families are not religious. And I think the way that the base has brought them in, the way a secular Zionist organization like the JNF and the base has worked together on bringing these guys to South Africa has been amazing. It's been an amazing experience about unity, about what we can achieve, and a real, as the rabbi said, I think it's a tribute to the South African community, the values that we have of working together, of across religious and secular lines, and I think an inspiration for what we can do when we work together.
Amazing. So may I ask the three of you to turn off your cameras? We're going to be speaking to Dalia, and we'll come back to you shortly after we've spoken to Dalia. Dalia, a big welcome. You're now virtually and digitally in South Africa. You were here in person a few weeks ago. You and your family have a remarkable story to tell. Tell us about the 7th of October.
Hi, Erev Tov, Shalom לכולם. Thank you for this invitation, and thank you for the bonds, the amazing bonds that we've created with the base and JNF and all the community. We feel like we're part of the community by now. The 7th of October, a day that unfortunately changed our life, and every single minute of our day we're still there. We're still in October 7th, even though we're 346 days afterwards. My two brothers-in-law, Yair and Eitan, were sleeping in their beds in Kibbutz Nir Oz. One of them, Yair, lives in Kibbutz Nir Oz, and Eitan lives in a city in the center, but he was visiting his brother for Simchat Torah. And they were just kidnapped from their safe room in the kibbutz. For the first month or month and a half, we had no clue what happened to them. We were able to talk to them for an hour that morning. They just texted us saying that they're safe within the safe room. They didn't talk about terrorists. They never mentioned what's going on. We were watching TV. We live in the center, an hour drive from there. And at 7:30 in the morning, they stopped answering. And yeah, and then the nightmare started, trying to figure out where they are, what's going on. Are they alive? Are they injured? Many bodies were not identified for, I think, almost a month and a half. So we were kind of trying to hold on to hope, but trying to be realistic as well.
Tell us a little about the Horn family, your husbands and your brother-in-laws. You've all got these really cool Hispanic accents.
Yeah, so the Horn family is all of them made Aliyah from Argentina. They were all born and raised in Argentina in a very Zionist, pro-Israel house. They all went to a Hebrew day school and a youth movement, and like Israel was all around them. I always say that just by understanding the names, Yair, Eitan, and Amos, you can understand like what was the goal of the parents. Yeah, and the home was all around Israel. So as soon as they finished high school, they made Aliyah, each one separately. So the first one was Yair, who's the oldest, and he joined, he came with a group of friends from his youth movement. So they all went to live in a kibbutz, Nativ Alamedei, and he joined the army. And then when Amos finished high school, my husband, he also made Aliyah and he joined kibbutz Sde Boker. And then Eitan could not wait anymore. So instead of finishing high school in Buenos Aires, Argentina, he just joined Nale program, which is a program for high school kids without their parents. And then later on, the parents arrived. They're separate for many, many years, but both of them arrived. So all the family, I mean, most of the family is here. Yeah, all of them came to Israel thinking that Israel is the place to be a free Jew, you know. In Argentina, they knew years of dictatorship and anti-Semitism and two big terror attacks against the Jewish community, one in the Israeli embassy and the other one in the AMIA, the building of the community. So safety was a thing they came to find in Israel. And I think it was more also about like self-realization, the possibility to be and do whatever they want to do. So this is how they find they're all here. Yair went back to Argentina for a few years after the army, and then he came back to Israel. And when he came back to Israel, he was searching for a community to be part of. So he joined Kibbutz Nir Oz, where one of his friends, childhood friend, was living and was part of the community already. Yair worked. It's crazy because Yair moved into the kibbutz the day that Tzuk Eitan operation started back in 2014. So all the families with the young kids were leaving the kibbutz to the center to have a few days of kind of like relax and not to spend all day in the shelters or safe room. And Yair was moving into the kibbutz, and everyone said, you know what, you can come next week. And he said, no, I'm staying here. So he was working at the dining room, the Cheder Ochel, and he was actually literally feeding those who stayed to either guard the kibbutz or just keep on working at the fields and the factory and everything. And yeah, since then he's there. He's a very central part of the kibbutz. He's in charge of the holidays, which makes him kind of like the superstar. And he's in charge of the local pub, and everyone loves him. And yeah, he's a person who's in love with this community project, and he truly believes in living there and being there, even though we had many conversations about the danger of living literally on the border, because Kibbutz Nir Oz, it's less than 2 kilometers from the border, and he believed in the fact that we need to keep the borders by living there. Eitan lives in Kfar Saba, which is the same city I live. Eitan, since he finished high school and the army. He dedicated his life to non-formal education. He lived in many kibbutzim around the country, which is actually amazing because I keep on going to demonstrations all around Israel and people just come up to me and say, you know, Eitan was my madrich here, my madrich there, like everyone knows Eitan. He worked with teens in kibbutzim. He worked with teens, new immigrants, kids who escaped the war in Ukraine and Russia. He worked in an Israeli youth movement. Very, very funny and very loving person. I don't know, as my husband says when he talks about his siblings, he says, "Anashim regilim," you know, normal people like me, like you, like all the people who are attending this webinar right now, people who had plans and dreams and hobbies. So the three of them, they're big fans of Hapoel Be'er Sheva, which is a soccer team of Be'er Sheva, which is a thing in Israel, like, you know, the periphery of Israel and strengthening like all those parts. And they're big fans of the Rolling Stones. So they would like go all around the world when there's a tour and just love to do asado like good Argentinians, barbecue and have fun.
So tell us what you know about the 7th of October insofar as relates to your family.
So I'll start by saying that we don't know much. So it was an hour that they kept on just texting saying that everything's okay. Till today, we have this question whether they didn't want to say what's going on, so we won't be frightened, even though we saw everything on TV. But I asked people from the kibbutz, you know, how those big WhatsApp groups of the kibbutz, everyone was saying like the tourists are in my house and this and that. So they never mentioned like anything. I don't know whether they were very busy holding the door handle or shocked or what. We know that at 7:30 they stopped answering. We kept on calling and calling and calling. We asked friends and neighbors and everyone we know in the kibbutz, and everyone was like yelling at us saying that they cannot go to look for them. And then I think it was around like 7 or 8 p.m. that we get a phone call from our friend saying, I'm standing at Yair's home and he's not there. This was like the first news we got. In the middle of the day at around noontime, my husband took the car keys and said, you know what, I'm driving there because he felt that something wrong. Like he felt that he needs to go and, I don't know, rescue them. I was able, luckily, to convince him not to go. My husband is not, like, he's not carrying a weapon. So, and even though if he would, you know, like, I guess you saw everything, he had no chance. But it was very strange to be throughout the whole day waiting for the call and watching what's going on and looking the terrorists broadcasting live from the kibbutz houses, how they're killing people. And we're just an hour away. So at 8 p.m. they call us, they say that they're not there and that they're evacuating the survivors from the kibbutz. Out of a kibbutz of 400 members, 100 did not come back that day. They were either murdered or taken hostage. We didn't know that they were taken hostage that night. For a few days, our friend was, the community was evacuated to Eilat. Our friend kept on going to the kibbutz every day to look over all the bodies and go around the houses and try to find like remainings or what he could find, because he felt the responsibility to give us an answer and to look for his best friend. And 10 days later, an army officer arrived to our house to tell us that they're missing what we knew. And I think it was a few weeks later that they said that they don't know if they're missing or hostages. We could not understand the difference at the beginning, but they could not realize what happened to them because they were going over, and we also went over all those horrible videos and footage, and we could not find anything, which is strange because we saw this is how many families knew what happened to their loved ones. The first time we actually got like a real real information was during the hostage deal, when the part of the women from the kibbutz came back. It was November 25th, and they told us that both of them are hostages, they are alive, they're not injured. Actually, we thought they're not injured because we saw that the door of the safe room was full with holes, that the terrorists shot the door, but there was not blood on the other side. So we thought that they might be like in a good shape, if that's the correct word to say. Yeah, that was the only time we knew something, November 25th. Actually, Sapir Cohen, who was the first one to visit your community, she spent most of the time in the tunnels and the first few days in the hospital in Gaza with Eitan. And she was able to tell us that Eitan met Yair a month after they were kidnapped. So for the first month, they did not know about each other. And after a month, they met, and she told us about their mental health situation and the physical situation. But it was a long time ago.
Has there been any DNA evidence or anything like that since then?
Yeah. I think at least twice they found tunnels. The army was either searching for hostages or for Sinwar, and they found a few places in the tunnels with clothing and spoons and stuff like this. So they brought us a T-shirt and a boxer with a DNA proof of Eitan, and also I think a teaspoon. And twice I think they found things with his DNA.
So you've been on an international campaign together with your husband. You've met the Red Cross. We'd like to hear about that. You've met Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations. You've gone to see the Pope. Tell us about those experiences.
That's horrible to find yourself in the middle of your life, having to stop everything you're doing and accept. I mean, on top of taking care of my family, and we have two young kids, 9 and 12, and of course taking care of my husband and his parents, because this is a situation that, I mean, I think that I'm the person who's living in this situation, and still I cannot believe like this is the nightmare we're living in. But we find ourselves in need of campaigning internationally, because we understood, A, that most of the world, at least at the beginning, was against us, and B, we understood that the Israeli government at first was very, I don't know if the word is shocked or paralyzed or what, but we understood that Israel by itself will not be able to solve the situation. So we started going and advocating. So it's strange, and we found, and I must admit that both of us, like my husband and me, we work in education, so we're not like diplomats. We don't know what's the correct thing to say. We always go with our personal story and like our request and the need. Like we ask them for help. I was in the Congress at the United States, and it was amazing to see all the congressmen and women, even those who are usually against Israel, like the most progressive Democrats. They were very into the stories, and they got very emotional, and they told us they understand this is a humanitarian issue that should be solved, and if they also understood that if they want to help free Gaza, so it starts with releasing the hostages. So that was a big surprise, and we felt a lot of support. And we also marched on the Israel parade in New York in the first week of June, where hundreds of thousands of people march along the Fifth Avenue in New York, and it was amazing. But then we also had not so nice experiences. My husband met with Antonio Guterres, which is the Secretary General of the United Nations, which is very well known with his anti-Semitic opinions, and I believe that he's not looking at the whole picture and just blaming Israel for something that, like, without even talking about the responsibility and the horrible acts of the Hamas. So my husband Amos was talking to him, and he kind of like was talking about, like, we need to help the Gaza population, and the Israeli delegation was saying that we also want to help the Gazan population if they release the hostages and they take off Hamas, so their life would be better. So this was kind of I don't know, it felt like we're coming to this international organization that was established back in 1945 with one goal, which is to prevent the next war, and they're just sitting there and looking to the other side. I met with the Red Cross at their office in Washington, D.C., and I felt like a very bad joke. Like, we were talking to them about how they're not fulfilling, like, their part. Like, they're asking to go and visit the Hamas terrorists, which are in Israeli prisons, and they're talking about the conditions, but they're not visiting, like, the hostages, and they're not doing any effort to make sure that the medications we, the families, sent are getting there. And we know that they didn't get there. And they were saying that Hamas is not letting them, and they don't want to get into, like, big conflicts. And we asked them, you know what? So just help us by publishing the fact that Hamas is not letting you visit, and Hamas is violating those laws and those things. And yeah, their answers was, I felt like I'm wasting my time. And unfortunately, I mean, for me, it was the last time. There were other meetings of families as well. Some families met the Pope. As Argentinians, we have a rabbi that we know personally, that he's a very good friend of the Pope. He's kind of like his best friend. And we try to talk to him and to move him towards calling upon, like, actions. So the day the hostage family forum sent a delegation, they were sitting with him for an hour. He was listening. They left the door, and the next one to enter the room was people from Gaza. So it felt once again a bit awkward, and he never, like, last week, I think, in his weekly call, he talked about the murder of the 6 hostages, Carmel, Hirsch, Almog, Alex and Eden, but we don't feel that he's doing anything, or maybe he just don't have any leverage on Hamas as well. This is also something important to say. And I met the Prime Minister of Qatar, which was a huge surprise for me. He was very committed to have Israel and Hamas sitting around the negotiation table. He was very well informed. We also felt that he was very, like, empathetic with us. Like, he was very, very nice. But once again, we know that Hamas has this double face, that they want to achieve the deal and they want to do the negotiation, but they're also funding Hamas, and they're also letting the Hamas leader to stay there. So, you know, they're part of the problem, as we say. Yeah, and I think now more delegations are going around the world. I personally kind of stopped, but many other families are still advocating.
Dalia, you, your husband, your kids, they came to South Africa recently on one of these JNF base trips. Tell us about your experience.
It was amazing, and we're so grateful and thankful. And I'll start by telling you what my daughter, Gali, she's 12, she told me, well, we were driving, Saul was driving us from the airport to his house, and she told me something like, Mom, why are they letting us into their home? And I was like, yeah, they invited us. This is the project. And I was explaining, and she said, but they don't know us. And I think that was, for me, the strongest moment that I understood that I can teach my daughter the most important lesson about the what is the Jewish people, and the phrase that Kol Israel Aravim Ze Laze. We're all responsible, and we all should take care one of each other. Now we in Israel are going through horrible time. I think never in the history of Israel, not even during the liberation, the Atzmaut war, we were suffering for that long, and other such a huge danger from all over, and feeling that we are alone. And the fact that we were able to have those 2 weeks of respite and love, they just like embraced us, and they made us part of their family, and we traveled around, and the kids had fun, and the community spoiled the kids, and it was a very important moment for us to give a timeout for the kids, and to show them that we're not alone.
And we had a breakfast together with church leaders and diplomats. There were even diplomats there from countries that maybe aren't so sympathetic to Israel, and yet they were incredibly empathetic and offered help. Did that come as a surprise? I mean, you had the king of the Shembe there, who came in with his praise singers and his entire entourage. You had bishops and archbishops and cardinals all in the room. Most black churches in South Africa just showing an enormous amount of support. And I know there was some degree of reluctance to come to South Africa, given the South African government's reaction. But how did you find the people of South Africa?
I think that breakfast was, for me, it was incredible, like an incredible moment, and very important to hear that people do understand that this is a humanitarian thing, and people do understand that Israel is the first victim, but those people, the Hamas organization, terror organization, is against democratic values and against Jews and Christians and even within the Muslim world. So I think people are starting to realize and open their eyes, and I think this was why the reaction was so good and so warming, and it was a huge surprise to listen to their comments after we spoke about the needs to go out to the streets and not only pray for us in Israel, but to go on the street and do a real change within South Africa, the political system, and I think it was very important to, as Israelis, to know once again that we're not alone.
So you've got two brothers-in-law stuck in the dungeons in Gaza. And as I ask everyone on the webinar to turn on their cameras, to Saul, to the rabbi, to Michael, as I ask them to all to turn on their cameras, I want to know what you want us to do. How can we help you? Tell us in some way how we can help your suffering and pain.
So I'll say that the relationship that we established, and for us, for their own family to know that we have you as friends and families over there, is a huge help. But if I could ask all the people who are participating in this webinar to help us by do not stop talking about hostages. These 101 people are real people, like me, like you, like my kids, and like your kids. And once we stop talking about them, it's going to get like normalized, the fact that, okay, there are hostages in Gaza, and and I don't know if, I guess you look at the pictures and you look at the news, and Gaza is being destroyed because those terrorists are using like all the civilian homes and buildings to shoot from there. So Israel is taking care of it. And as Gaza is being more and more destroyed, the fact and the chances that we will be able to find those hostages in the near future are decreasing, and I'm not even talking about only the hostages that are still alive. I'm talking about the bodies that they're just leaving them like behind, like the Rabbi Perez was just here on this webinar. Like, we need to be able to bring everyone, the living people, to come back to Israel and have a medical treatment and to go back to life. And the people who were murdered, we want to bring them to a proper Jewish burial, right, in Israel. So as days go by, the chances are decreasing. So by you talking about them nonstop and engaging the story of the hostages in every conversation, and it doesn't matter if you're talking to a Jewish person or not. I think that as long as people are talking, they're not forgetting, and use all the contacts you have. It doesn't have to be only political contacts. It can be even, I don't know, businessmen and women who are doing businesses with Qatar, and use all the leverage you have. And in Cape Town, there's a Hamas office. So I don't know what kind of conversation can go out of that office, and yeah, keep on shouting out to the world that those are people, and as Rabbi Perez said before, Kfir, a baby 1-year-old, and Ariel 5-year-old, and elders and women that I don't even want to start thinking about what they're going through. I think you're having Amit Susana, as for now, she's a strong voice for the horrible things that women are going through over there. Just talk about it and do everything you can to help us.
Dalia, I'm going to ask everyone to leave you a message as well. We have people watching us tonight on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Zoom. We'd love, number one, if you're on Zoom, please like and subscribe our channel so we can communicate more easily with you. But more importantly, leave Dalia a message. What she and her family and her parents-in-law are going through with 2 people stuck in the terror dungeons of Gaza is just absolutely horrendous. We cannot forget about them. We have to be proactive and we have to be active. We need to speak to our city councillors. We need to speak to church leaders. We need to speak to our rabbis. We need to be on the streets. We're now going for nearly a year that these people have been held hostage. And if we do nothing, then we become complicit in this as well. We have to find our voices, and we have to stand up for those who at the moment are held captive. This is the test of our generation. With that, I want to thank everyone who's joined us this evening. I want to once again, if you would like to make a donation to help the base shul and the JNF bring out more hostages to South Africa and hostage families to South Africa, we're going to put on the screen again, as well as post into the chats on Zoom, on YouTube, on Facebook and Instagram. We're going to post the donation details so you can make a donation to make sure that we bring this out. And I want to give a final word to all of our participants this evening to be able to, I see I've lost my screen with the donation details on, so I'm going to ask Dylan to throw that up in a second. Dylan, if you could do that for us, please. But Michael, let's start with you.
Thanks, Howard, for hosting the webinar and for having us. I think it's, as you said, this is the quintessential issue of our time as Jews, to stand up for the hostages and to do everything we can to help bring them home. And it's really privileged to be able to partner with the base and with you on this webinar, and be able to do everything we can to try and help the hostages and to try and help hostage families that have suffered so much. And as a community, we have a real opportunity here to bring them to South Africa, to share a bit of love and a bit of warmth and hospitality. And really, we just encourage everybody to help us and get involved.
Saul, you've been integrally involved in this process as well. Tell us how our community has actually benefited from getting people here.
Howie, thanks for having us. And Dalia, it's the best to see your face and hear your voice again. Our community really has benefited in that we've been able to now touch the hostages. We've been able to put real faces and real stories and real families behind the posters that we see all over our own cities and our own homes, and by people's Shabbos candles. And we can relate to it. It now feels real, and we're able to reach out, and we're able to just give these people from our community and individuals in the community a giant hope. Because being really, really far away and being an incredibly Zionistic community, we sometimes feel lost and hopeless. And this project is really bringing the hostage cause and the pain of the hostages to our communities, to our schools, to our shuls, and to our families.
So, Aaron, we're heading towards Rosh Hashanah. You're a rabbi. I want you to give us a brocha, not just to Dalia and her family, but to all of us. Give us some hope and inspiration as we're in the month of Elul, and every morning we blow the shofar to remind us of the day of judgment and how we must repent for a better life for all of us. But we hope for a better year ahead, not just for all of our families, but we are one big family. Give us a word of inspiration.
Howie, first of all, thank you so much for this evening. To give a bracha, I'm not sure that I'm the right person in this regard, but I will say this just to mention for a moment, listening to Aviva and to Rav Doron and now Dalia, just to say to the three of them a big thank you. You've all shown tremendous courage, and you show tremendous courage. To Rav Doron and to Shelley to say, Hamakom Yenachem Etchem, B'soch Sha'avele Etzion Yerushalayim. To Aviva, I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone here that we're davening for Keith to be returned. Dalia, Amos, to your whole family, we're davening for his brothers, for your brothers-in-laws to be returned, and for all the hostages to be returned, and for the end of this war to take place soon. To echo some words that Dalia mentioned, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'zeh. We're all responsible for one another. And, one of the major impacts of this war has been that we, the Jewish people throughout the world, have learned how much we are, in fact, interconnected with one another. There was a time, there perhaps even is still to this day, but it's unfortunate. There was a time where it was more so the case, where there was much more distinction between this camp and that camp, right wing and left wing. And I think we could say that Baruch Hashem, by and large, the world over, there is much more of an understanding that regardless of our views, regardless of how we choose to live our lives as individuals, we are all connected, responsible for one another. So, in relation to a bracha, I'll say this as a tefillah, as a prayer, my prayer, and hopefully it is our prayer, that we accomplish a greater sensitivity towards one another, that we recognize and realize that we're able to have an impact on one another by caring more for one another, by working on ourselves to be better people, to continue to be good people, to continue to be kind people, especially in the face of what it is that we are challenging or what we are facing, challenged with. Howie, thank you again, saying to everyone, we should all be written, we should all be inscribed for, please God, a good year, a year with no longer war, a year where all the hostages are returned, a year of safety for the soldiers and for the residents of Israel and for Jews the world over, a year in which there isn't this major hatred that is permeating the world, a year of peace and a year of success for everyone. Thank you so much.
I want to thank the thousands of people who've joined us this evening to hear some very difficult stories. Difficult, but yet at the same time, as we said earlier, stories that have to be told. Now, the choice of how to react is really very much up to you. Thank you for joining us this evening. Good night.